Dr. McPherson, how could, you referenced ESG scores in your opening comments. How could ESG metrics be making energy more expensive?
Sure. So now there are a variety of different metrics out there, so we need to be somewhat specific, but generally speaking, the SEC, by its own admission, is for the proposed disclosure will have billions upon billions of dollars in compliance costs, first and foremost. So there are additional costs to businesses across the board, which will trickle down to consumers. In addition to that, though, depending on how the ESG measure is structured, it would be very easy to rank lower companies that do produce greenhouse gas emissions. That would stymie investment, make it more expensive for them to borrow. Those higher borrowing costs for CapEx or whatnot would once again be passed through to consumers.
And can you tell us how the Inflation Reduction Act provides billions to fund green energy initiatives, and are those initiatives currently bringing down the price of energy?
So the price of energy still remains far above what it was when President Biden took office by about 40% or so. If one were to argue that the IRA is reducing costs, we're yet to see it in a substantial way vis-a-vis when President Biden took office.
And are there any hurdles that you see to sourcing the raw materials needed to implement the renewable energy initiatives outlined in the Inflation Reduction Act?
The United States has a wealth of natural resources, and in theory, we could mine these resources here at home. However, due to onerous restrictions, the NEPA process, capricious removals of land from leasing, all things we've seen under the Biden administration, unfortunately, it just takes far too long. So on average, it's believed that it can take between 5 and 7 years to permit a mine here in the United States. In Canada and Australia, they can do it in 3 to 5 years. We do not need to repeal all of our environmental regulations. We need to protect the environment, but we also need to learn from comparable countries like Canada, like Australia, who can do it just so much quicker and in a responsible way.
And Dr. McPherson, President Biden has just proposed a $6.8 trillion budget. If fully implemented, how would that budget affect inflation?
It's a simple question of supply and demand when it comes to energy. We know over the past few years, the past 2 years to be specific, about 25% of the inflation that we've seen is either related to direct energy costs or that pass-through that affects businesses that then affects consumers. Now, if the Biden administration were to implement that budget but maintain its current energy policies, that will increase demand for energy across the board, wherever it's from, but stymie supply. That's going to push prices higher.
Not good news for folks back in my district. Last question, Dr. McPherson. President Biden said in 2021 that inflation was just temporary. Did that end up being true?
I mean, maybe it's a question of semantics, because it's still here.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield.